is woman who sees. She is woman who sees. She is crone woman, skull and bone woman, moss and stone woman, crone woman, crone woman. Deep earth cave mother, dark moon blood mother, blood mother, blood mother. She is woman who knows. She is woman who knows. She is hidden woman. She is shadow woman. Midnight cloak woman. Raven croak woman. Owl, bat, moth woman. Owl woman, owl woman. She is woman who waits. She is woman who waits. She is death mother. She is birth mother. Earth mother, earth mother, earth, birth, death mother. She is north woman, winter storm woman, ancient hands woman, wisdom woman, old woman, old woman. She is woman who sees. She is woman who sees. She is night woman. She is woman who sees. She is woman who sees. She is crone woman, skull and bone woman, moss and stone woman, crone woman, crone woman. Deep earth cave mother, dark moon blood mother, blood mother, blood mother. She is woman who knows. She is woman who knows. She is hidden woman. She is shadow woman. Midnight cloak woman. Raven croak woman. Owl, bat, moth woman. Owl woman, owl woman. She is woman who waits. She is woman who waits. She
Sleep doesn't come easily anymore. That's just as well. My dreams are disjointed, fractured, unsettling. Shards of broken glass containing fragments of images, memories. I can't tell if I'm dreaming or consciously thinking. I don't want to think. I want to sleep. I want to sink into oblivion and rest, forget. But my mind won't switch off. The world has been grayer recently, with little flashes of color here and there. Red, orange, yellow, green, pink. Cascades of colors dance out at me from the darkness, as if my mind is sending symbols of hope, fireworks. But then I just feel watched, surveyed, monitored, as if some shadow is staring down at me. I'm thinking of death again. Skeletons are dancing around inside my head, lunging at me. Their bones clatter like teeth. Teeth are bone too, aren't they? I don't know. I don't know what I'm thinking. I feel discombobulated, wailing at my own distorted reflection. I wonder, did I ever recognize my true self? Did I ever even see my true form? Do any of us know what we look like to others? Does it matter? Should it? My head hurts. I can't stop thinking about the storm, the one my mother always talked about. I need to think about colors and beauty, dancing, cheerfulness, joy, at least the illusion of it before the darkness takes over again. Life isn't like storybooks. I wasn't there, but I feel like I was because I heard about it so much. Confusion, chaos, panic, disorder. When I was younger, I got into watching vintage animation on YouTube. Skeletons danced in those segments. Death lurked closer in those days. The space between dreams and consciousness, life and death, sanity and insanity. And isn't that what it's all about? Doing your utmost to ensure that everything in your body stays in perfect harmony, flowing along healthily from head to toe, guarding yourself against illness and dysfunction and noise and chaos and bother. Madness is the ultimate bother. It disrupts everything and everyone around it. I should know. My father didn't keep his body aligned. His cells turned on him. Cancer. He sickened when I was 4 and died when I was 9. My mother never got over it. I adapted. Chaos, uncertainty, and disorder was the soundtrack of our lives. The average. The norm. Mother was familiar with chaos, if not immune to it. Her personality had been forged within the crisis of a storm, a violent hurricane that blew through her childhood town, taking her house and nearly her doll and displacing her sister. That set the stage for everything that happened later. All the confusion, all the darkness, and all the water. Water everywhere. Aunt Grace got well acquainted with water when she was 4, and my mom lost grip of her hand. She blamed herself forevermore, but she had only been 6 at the time. How much can a 6-year-old be blamed? I'm not 6. I'm a grown woman. I'm studying to become a fully fledged pathologist. I'm going to be married to Carter. He's a machinist. He's fit and manly, but also soft-spoken and gentle. I've adulted, I suppose. But my mind has other ideas. I prefer to keep my head in the clouds. That keeps it out of the gutter. Clouds remind me of angels. Aunt Grace never said much about them, but I suppose she believed. She certainly believed in mermaids, Atlantis. Anything watery was her obsession. She'd been carried away in floodwaters after my mother let go of her hand. It was only for a split second, just to keep her favorite doll from blowing away, but it was enough time for the water to surge and take Grace with it. They should have evacuated sooner, but my grandparents were immigrants with little understanding of English, and their television was on the fritz, so they hadn't been keeping up with the news. Then it was suddenly water. Water everywhere. By the time they made a run for it, the water carried Grace off. For 3 days, they searched for her body amid the ruins of the flood. It was assumed that she was dead, but 3 days later, she was found on the edge of town, standing outside the swamp, soaking wet and bleeding. It was strange because that area had been searched before. I grew up near a big concrete overpass, and I used to wonder if it would be strong enough to withstand such a storm, such a surge. I used to think that if I tied myself to its iron fences come such an occasion, I'd be safe. I'd escape the same fate as Aunt Grace. She had hit her head, but she knew her name and recognized her family. The doctors at the hospital said she was lucky. After being whipped around amid the floodwater and debris, she could have drowned. She should have had a concussion. Many people died of internal injuries after such events. Somehow, preschool-aged Aunt Grace escaped any such outcome. For her part, Aunt Grace relentlessly insisted that she was saved by a mermaid. She said she had purple hair and a teal tail and skin that glistened sparkled in the light. She said the mermaid gave her gills and took her under the sea to Atlantis. She gave her oysters and mussels and showed her beautiful pearls. The gates to her progressive madness had been opened, never to be closed again. "30 years later, Aunt Grace moved in with us. She arrived in June, right at summer's break. I knew, even before Mom told me, that I was going to be her minder. That was my responsibility. At the time, I accepted it without question. Looking back on it now, I realize how unfair it was. I wasn't a professional. I wasn't a psychiatric nurse. I was only 11. She arrived wearing a light green coat. She was always cold and paranoid about the sun. She said that sun would dry her up. Her suitcase was full of seashells. Her brain was full of weird ideas. Her medication was the only thing that kept her manageable, docile. Getting her to take it was a production that worsened as time went on. All of her convictions worsened with time. Initially, no one had paid much attention to little Grace's rambling, although it was odd, since she never before showed much interest in mermaids or fairies or anything magical. Grace said the mermaid took her home and swam right into the swamp with her amid the trees and water sprites. Grace liked water sprites. She said they were friendly. The mermaid, Nerissa, she said her name was Nerissa, could only swim so far into the swamp, though, and warned her to be wary of water witches. They lurked in the murky depths. Aunt Grace swore that it was true. She hated sewers her whole life. They freaked her out. She said the water witches lived in them, forming subterranean covens. She had a good imagination. Even the doctors never denied that. According to Aunt Grace, back when she was a kid, a water witch had reared up at her before she could make it through the swamp to the safe light of day. The old hag reached up and grabbed at her, wishing to drag her down into the muddy depths and devour her, no doubt. Somehow, she escaped into the daylight, but she hit her head in the process. She used to repeat this story with this edge in her voice. It really affected her even years later. Whatever she thought she'd seen that day haunted her. She said she felt dizzy, woozy was the word she used as an adult, and sat out in the safety of the daylight. The water witch was stalking her in the shadowy swamp grove. Grace said she could clearly see her dark form lurking amid the twisted tree trunks, but she eventually gave up. It was far too bright of an hour for her. After that, some neighbors spotted Grace and took her to the hospital where she was eventually reunited with her family. My mother, Beatrice, and her mother were so relieved that Grace was alive. They assumed that all would be well forevermore. But that's not how it happened. Grace was never all there, ever again. At first, her rambling about mermaids had seemed innocent, but it ended up being relentless. No matter how old she got, Grace never stopped ranting, sometimes outright raving about mermaids and witches and whatever else popped into her head. She was obsessed with water. My mother's family lived in a town by the sea, and Grace took to collecting seashells. She begged local restaurants to give her the shells remaining over from clam dinners. Usually the busboys complied, wanting nothing in return but to linger their gazes, perhaps a little too long, on her figure. Aunt Grace had been a looker. She painted the shells diligently, put them into a suitcase, and wandered around the coastline, throwing them in the water as offerings. Occasionally, she even bathed with them. Grace also obsessively collected sea glass and other treasures that she found washed up on the shores. She decorated her room with the findings and declared that it was her octopus garden. She said the mermaid, Nerissa, had showed her such beauty during their time together. She also spent any birthday and Christmas money she got on pearl necklaces. Well, faux ones, since they reminded her of the jewelry that she saw in Atlantis. Grace could not be trusted with income. Her behavior was weird, but not violent and aggressive. Those tendencies only reared up later, when she fixated on pollution and all the damages that it caused to the mer people. No environmental group would keep her on when she started spewing stories about mermaids and sprites and water witches. Worse still, if anyone seemed to question her flood story events, she flew into hysterical rages, scandalized by the thought of not being believed. One sunny Tuesday afternoon in June, she attacked a trio of fishermen, insisting that they were murderers, bringers of death. Finally, Grace got committed to a mental institution. The last straw snapped when she attempted to set fire to the swamp. She said she'd done it to rid the world of the lurking witch. Her plan was to boil her alive, but before the fire could spread enough to do serious damage, the fire department arrived and put out the flames. No one saw a witch, but they did see teenage Grace standing at the edge of the swamp, staring at the flames with a gasoline canister in hand, ranting and screaming and laughing. She was officially handed over to the psychiatric hospital shortly thereafter. My grandparents were hardworking people and loving parents, but they were poor. They could not monitor Grace as closely as she required. Beatrice, Mom, was also working and going to high school and hanging out with her boyfriend, Paolo, who would later become her husband and my father. He worshipped her. He immigrated here alone when he was barely 16. She was his everything, and he was all she saw. It sounds sweet, yet my mother was tormented by that past. She said that she should have paid more attention to her sister. Grace was ill, and Mom blamed herself for that. If I hadn't let go of her hand, if only. She'd say that over and over again, a chorus of regret. Compounding her guilt was the fact that Grace often embarrassed her. Their parents, maintaining an old country mentality, were ashamed of their youngest child's behavior. Mental illness was perceived as taboo. Over the following years, Grace was in and out of mental institutions. She would get out and then do something crazy like strip stark naked on a public beach and get put back in. My mother missed her sister in her absence in an odd sort of way. Self-blame and regret turned into a sort of melancholy meditation. Mom spent hours in Grace's attic room, usually in the wee hours when their parents slumbered, amid the so-called garden treasures derived from the sea. Mom even wore her pearls and tried on her clothes and toted her umbrella around and thought obsessively about her, wondering what it was like inside of her brain. Grace's existence haunted my mother's every moment. Fancy clothes were a staple of my parents' wedding. I've seen photos to prove it. No one had much money, but the women knew how to sew and make themselves look like royalty, making $1 out of 15 cents, as they said. My parents, Beatrice and Paolo, married in the little white church by the bayside. Grace attended the wedding. She wore a turquoise sequin dress that resembled a mermaid's tail. She carried a purple umbrella. At first, it had all gone well. Then Grace learned that salmon was on the menu and had a meltdown of epic proportions. Screaming, shattering glass, kicking, clawing, biting. The cake did not fare well. She was promptly removed from the catering hall and escorted back to the madhouse. None of the guests ever forgot. Over the following years, Grace stayed sequestered, and my grandparents passed away, both prematurely. Overwork and no medical assistance had done them in. I was born. My father got cancer and died, and my mother was left alone. A widow with a 9-year-old child living in an urban jungle of concrete and metal. Around this same time, most psychiatric hospitals were closing down, including the massive state one which housed Aunt Grace. She got moved to a care home, which was a lot smaller and more homely. It was also notably more lax on security. Less than 2 weeks after her arrival, Grace escaped the facility and jumped off of the nearest bridge into the dark water below. She did this at 2 p.m, in broad daylight, and a passerby saw the whole thing. He jumped in and saved her, although Grace was anything but grateful. She fought her savior fiercely. The police and EMS considered it a suicide attempt. Grace claimed it wasn't. "Once I'm underwater, I'll sprout gills and breathe like I did when I was little," she declared hysterically. Mom and I were her only kin left in the country, so the police contacted my mother about the incident. She took me with her as she drove to the hospital and spoke to the doctors. Still racked with guilt over letting go of her sister's hand all those years ago, Mom decided to let Grace come live with us. It was a kind gesture, but problematic. We were poor, and Mom worked all day in a department store. She'd been a cashier since high school. College hadn't been an option for her or Dad, and when he died, we were left with debts, not an inheritance. Mom used to take me to the store because she couldn't afford a babysitter. I loved it. A palace of consumerism where I got to learn about makeup and shoes and shiny jewels befitting of a queen. The department store was my playground, and it made me want to aspire for more, to do better, to afford all the things that Mom couldn't. Maybe that's why I got into pathology. Doctors made money, I was told. But it's a lie. I've got more loan debts than I can handle. The joys of exploring the department store ended when Grace came to stay. I had met Aunt Grace before. I occasionally visited her in the hospital. Mom went much more, though. Grace was always nice to me. She frequently complimented my hair. She said it resembled Nerissa's, with the exception of the color. I wasn't afraid of her, but I was nervous when she moved in with us. I didn't know what to expect. I was with her all day, every day. At first, she was happy sitting in the house watching The Little Mermaid on repeat or taking very long baths all day long. It was bizarre behavior for a woman well into her 30s, but it kept her indoors until it rained. She was obsessive about standing outside during downpours. Puddles delighted her. Despite her weirdness, I did enjoy spending time with Aunt Grace. Her stories were off the wall, but enjoyable, and Grace was always happy and upbeat, unlike my mother, who was quiet and sullen, joyless. Over time, Aunt Grace started to venture out of the house more and more, taking me with her. We would find bodies of water to walk beside, and she would tell me about her undersea experiences of long ago. We would occasionally take the bus to the seaside and collect seashells. We had hours of fun painting them. Mom never did anything crafty like that with me. We would often dress up and pretend that we were attending fine parties in the undersea kingdom of Atlantis. We lounged around like ladies of leisure and imagined dining with Neptune and dancing with nymphs and sprites and admiring the lionfish and flounders, whales and turtles, sand sharks and blue crabs that roamed around the coral castles amid the jellyfish and octopi and starfish. But it wasn't all fun and art. Grace started taking her medication less frequently. When she didn't take her medication, her behavior grew less stable. Her voice shriller. Her words more accusing. Sometimes I secretly pretended that I was at my parents' wedding, witnessing her famous outburst. Normally it was innocent enough. Grace usually only raved about water witches and made no direct threats toward me or anyone else. But for all the fun that we had, I started to notice that sometimes Grace looked different, menacing, as if there were several different people living in her one body. I was unnerved by Aunt Grace sometimes, but I was more unnerved by my own perceptions. They were becoming distorted and confused. It started with dreams filled with water, pouring down on me and submerging me. Then, Atlantis. Every night I dreamt of coral castles and seahorses and merpeople and seaweed. So much. Sometimes when I'm awake and standing near water's edge, I think I see the water sprites. Out of the corners of my eye, of course. Water sprites are spry and flighty. But they were here, there, everywhere. I'd spend hours looking out the window at the irrigation system outside and the river and ocean beyond that, and wonder if what I knew of the world was really nothing at all but the bare surface of reality, of possibility. It all morphs into an endless cycle and circle that makes my head throb and bang like a house coming off its foundation. It's akin to a blender or a vacuum, a relentless whirring noise in my head, even though I know nothing's there. The only sound is my voice, which is really merely my thoughts. I'm not thinking out loud. At least I hope I'm not. I don't know anymore. I've been lucky with men. I've only had one boyfriend, Carter, and he wants to marry me. We met at a neighborhood game night, one of the rare events I could attend when Mom was taking a vacation week and could stay home with Grace. We partnered to play charades and got to talking, and the rest is history. He sees the beauty of the cityscape, too. He works with metals. He sees the dignity in structures, streetlights, billboards, concrete, supporting beams, things that most people would find ugly. I suppose his unique viewpoint, a sort of other-mindedness, is what made him so accepting of Grace. I didn't tell him about her at first. All he knew about me was that I was another poor neighborhood kid trying to get by, but we clicked. And I ended up telling him my life story, and by default, Grace's. He was my friend, but I knew from the start that it was deeper than that. I knew we were going to get into a relationship, so he had to know the background of my family, including the reasons why Grace lived with us. I knew he was prepared for her craziness when I finally introduced them. He met her before Mom met him. Yet, I wasn't prepared for just how well he took to her. Carter knew exactly how to humor Aunt Grace, but he never mocked her. Truthfully, I think he was impressed by her storytelling skills. She liked him too. She took well to anyone who would listen to her. Sometimes Carter would accompany us on our night walks. He kept it our secret too. He'd sneak out of his house courtesy of his bedroom window and patrol the neighborhood with us. On those midnight walks, Grace always wore her green coat and talked endlessly about the wonders of Atlantis. It was beautiful there, nothing like the drab city streets. Carter listened with rapt attention and asked the most unusual questions. He was curious about the coral castles Grace described, and she was thrilled to give him more details. I suppose I officially fell in love with him shortly thereafter, where we spent a day on the beach, creating a sandcastle city and adorning it with shells and sea glass. That remains one of my happiest memories. Grace recognized that I was growing up and told me that she didn't mind seeing me kiss Carter. She suspected that we'd end up married long before I did. She even mentioned having had a boyfriend herself once, although I cannot imagine where or how. Perhaps she actually had no boyfriend. She might have made the whole thing up. I should make an effort to get to know my mother as a person more now, since growing up, I didn't really know her at all. I loved her, of course, but her life wasn't easy and it took a toll. Poverty, Dad getting sick, being widowed, being a single mother, being undereducated, working low-wage jobs. Basically, adopting Aunt Grace was just another brick in an already very heavy load. It's no wonder she had no time to spare, to bond. She always seemed so tired and drawn and gray, as if all the life had been systematically, vampirically sucked out of her. Yet I do remember her telling me once about her fascination with the moon. She said when she was little, she was convinced that a man lived on it. She said when she grew up, she wanted to become an astronaut and an engineer so she could both build a rocket and then ride it into outer space to meet him. When Mom met Dad, her Paolo, he became her moon, her stars, her sky, sun, ground, and air, the man of her life. He was 3 years older than her, and he didn't go to school. He didn't even speak English. He was living with a group of other migrants in a small rooming house and doing carpentry work. He only met Mom because my grandfather badly needed the roof retiled, and his back was too bad to do it himself. The first time she saw him, he was standing on the roof of her house. She told me that he happened to glance down, see her looking up, and gave her a smile and a wave that started everything. The last 2 years of his life were tough, a steady downward spiral. And he was young, so young. I never stopped missing my dad, but his final months were so dreadful, so wretched, that I felt an odd sort of relief when he passed away. I miss him terribly. But I do wonder what's out there, sometimes to the point that I think I'm going mad. I think I see things out of the corner of my eyes. Mermaid tails splashing in the bay, harpies flying around the treetops, elves shuffling around the alleyways. I imagine monsters in the sewers and ghosts in the halls. I've become completely convinced that ghosts exist and think I hear ogres stomping around on the roof at midnight. Those are the times when I want to lie still among the sheets until the inner tremors stop. I am tormented by my own mind. At times, it feels like a volcano is erupting in my brain, a tornado is tearing through my cranium, or an earthquake is taking hold of my very soul, shifting my sense into oblivion, like drowning in darkness. Carter and I were in the park one day when a windstorm blew up. The grass danced like an earthquake. For some reason, it made me think of aliens, as if I expected to see a spaceship coming down for a landing. The surface of water reflects like glass. That had been the undoing of Narcissus. It is my fascination. Water has many properties. It's a cleanser and a purifier above all else. We spent as much time as we could in parks. They were scarce in the city, but they existed if one was willing to venture a walk to get to them, and we were more than willing. We were eager. Gardens are so lovely. Plants and flowers are life's gifts, the earth's treasures. They need water to thrive too, Grace used to declare gleefully and repeatedly like a broken record. Just like us. Our bodies are mostly liquid, you know, and there's more water on Earth than land. That's why Atlantis is so vast. The world is so vast and beautiful and lovely. How can one deny the existence of God when there are dozens of tiny heavens all around us? Carter took me to see Monet paintings once at the museum, which was a big date since he'd never been to it either, and I was enchanted by the imagery. Art and literature became part of my life more after that museum visit. Our neighborhood had a surprisingly well-stocked library, and I checked out books about art, both ancient and modern, mythology, Shakespeare. I shared everything with Aunt Grace. We even decided to write our own spectacular show, mermaid-themed, of course. And we had a plot and characters and a few musical numbers and dance routines written down in a spiral notebook. We had hours of fun thinking up such things, especially as we ran around enjoying the spring and summertime. The arts were distilled imagination. They made life worth living. No wonder Aunt Grace had such a flair for the dramatic, the fanciful. The arts could reflect the darkness and light, the good and the evil, the benevolent and the malevolent. I've come to see that most things in life are neither black nor white, but varying shades of gray. Looking back on it, we spent an obscene amount of time lounging around, resting and daydreaming and pretending. We would search for gnomes and pixies and the ever-elusive fairies. We never caught one, but Grace swore that she saw them darting from the corner of her eyes. At first, I didn't believe her, but after a few weeks, I started to see them too. Once, while exploring the woods, we came upon a homeless man. Grace had been refusing to take her medication, and I'd been forgetting to sneak it, so she immediately asked him if he was a wizard and if he'd seen any unicorns or dragons while camping. It was midday, but he was drunk. I could smell the whiskey on him. He started raving at Grace, and I tugged her arm, and we both ran. He simply retreated back to his makeshift abode. But when I was with Grace, I was her protector more than she was mine. It was a daunting but also captivating realization. It gave me an occasion to rise to. I had no friends and little freedom. Carter was my only outlet, my savior. He had a tough, brisk, masculine exterior, but he valued nature. He didn't see much of it growing up, but the significance and dignity of each tree was not lost on him. His parents worked too, singing the same immigrant song of my grandparents, and starting at the age of 10, he planted begonias in the dirt under the tree nearest to their house. He hadn't expected anything to bloom, but the flowers had sprouted wildly. And although unauthorized by the city, no one bothered them. Those flowers were beloved. His grandmother could see them from the kitchen window where she spent most of her time. Red was her favorite color. Carter had that sweetness about him. Until this day, he tends to her garden. It was in the botanical garden that I first realized how dangerous Aunt Grace's delusions could be. We had been frolicking near the pond, a common occurrence. Suddenly, Aunt Grace was behind me, shoving my head under the water. "Open your eyes! Can you see it?" she rambled urgently. Submerged, I couldn't breathe. I tried to scream. Big mistake. My mouth, my lungs filled with water. Only bubbles escaped. I felt myself blacking out, the world growing dark. And then I was suddenly lifted back into the air. I remember the fear that shot through me when I saw the crazed look of glee on Aunt Grace's face. It was the expression of someone devoid of all sense or any reason. "Did you see it?" she kept asking.
"Isn't it beautiful? Let me see your gills."
After that, I made more of an effort to secretly grind up her meds and slip them into her food. It kept her calmer. I cannot help but wonder, though, what if she had succeeded in drowning me? Would I have become an angel, flying in the heavens, playing a harp and laying claims to clouds? Or would I have become a ghost, a wandering spirit? Perhaps my spirit would become a famous resident of the gardens. If my spirit stayed on, wandering forevermore amid the tree groves, I would bear witness to changing times, different generations, decades, eons. I have toyed with the notion of killing myself one day, intentionally drowning myself in the pond like Grace nearly had accidentally done when I was a kid. Of course, I don't tell anyone about such thoughts. I don't want to worry them. I don't want to get locked up. It's then that I consider the lure of the water, the temptation to leave my earthly body and exist in spirit form. It wouldn't be hard. I'd simply refuse to go to the light. The water is so peaceful and serene in the sunlight. Maybe I could sprout a fish's tail and live among the koi and merrily eat morsels of bread, socializing within feeding frenzies. It would be an easy life, a good one. If I died in fish form, perhaps I could haunt in fish form too. A ghostly koi. Anything is possible. My auntie told me so. I'm still young enough to get pregnant. The idea of conceiving frightens me, considering that I cannot guarantee that my genes are healthy. How could I condemn a child to a life like that of Grace, ranting and confused and fearful and maniac? I'm hardly so cruel. By September of that first year, Mom switched career paths and hours. Working the night shift at packing plants meant that she could stay with Grace during the day. Mom figured out how to consistently drug Grace up with sleeping pills, and I was an apt pupil learning the techniques. Grace would slumber 8 hours straight, and I would also rest without worrying that she was going to escape from the apartment and try to kill herself again. Grace didn't like living under Mom's watchful eye. She frequently had temper tantrums and would shoot dirty looks and mean stares at her every chance she got. Grace and I formed an even stronger camaraderie after she started perceiving Mom as an oppressor, a guard, a jailer. Despite it all, I was a good kid. I stayed out of trouble. I didn't want to make waves. Grace made enough of those. I didn't rock the boat. I minded my P's and Q's. I walked the proverbial line. But one night, when I was 19, I went to a neighbor's house party and dared to try some whiskey. It was only a few swigs, but it worked fast. Before I knew it, the world was spinning, not like a gentle merry-go-round, but a violent tilt-a-whirl. The party was busy and packed, and no one noticed how tipsy I was. I stumbled out, alone, planning to head home a la the irrigation pathway. To leave, I had to walk down these steep spiral stairs, which were familiar to me because they were identical to the ones in my elevator-less building, but my head was buzzing like a chainsaw. Worse still, the whole way back home, I felt watched and stalked and threatened. It was a disconcerting sensation of being followed by someone or something, like a water witch who dragged itself out of the river to pursue me, bent on eating me like it had intended to eat Aunt Grace decades before. I know it was there. I heard it cackling. Run, rabbit, run. 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 And as I hurried and eventually ran along the concrete path, under the steel metal of the overhead bridge, in the dark of night, barely illuminated by streetlights, shadows reached out toward me, grabbed at me, seeking my end, conspiring with the witches of the water. I was wearing Aunt Grace's favorite green coat, the same one she'd worn on the day that she arrived. I loved its color, and she let me wear it. Perhaps that was the problem. Maybe there really was a witch of the waters, and they were a tracking species. Maybe she thought I was Grace. We bore more than a passing resemblance to one another. The thing about fear is that it morphs, multiplies. There was something behind me. Something with long claws and big teeth and bad intentions. Something that cackled. I was utterly terrified when I got home. It wasn't easy getting up the spiraling stairs. Everything was spinning around and around, but nothing was there. Nothing but shadows and the stairs and the chipped paint and the ugly bare light bulbs that illuminated the slumlord's building that we resided in. It was shabby and old, and nothing worked well. Not the stove, not the electricity, not the plumbing. It was hot in the summer and cold in the winter, one step up from squatting in an abandoned building. But I've never been so relieved to see our run-down apartment corridor. I shook and sobbed with relief when I got in the door of my apartment. I was trembling so badly that I could barely unbutton Grace's coat. I fell into an uneasy, intoxicated sleep, but I dreamt I was awake. I still felt eyes on me. At one point, I was startled awake to find Aunt Grace sitting on my bed. She was staring at me with narrowed, hardened eyes. "I told you," she said. "I told you," she said. I never took as much as a sip of alcohol again after that. Uncertainty and doubt plague many people, but this is more than that. It's a deeper, visceral fear that something deep inside of me is unwinding, if not yet broken. It's a sense of relentless dread. I cannot be happy like this. I cannot carry the torch of hope and sweetness and brightness that my father left me. The darkness is drowning me. At first, it's all blackness, nothingness, a void. Then the dreams come in waves. In most of them, I'm walking in the woods, lost and seemingly alone. At times, those woods resemble swamps, as if Grace transferred some of her childhood memories from her lost days to me. I also dream of women in white, the ghosts of other victims, the missing, the dead, the devoured. I dream of my wedding. Notably, I dream of myself in my wedding dress. I've already purchased it. Aunt Grace helped me select it so it's adorned with pearls. I'm wandering through the swamps at midnight, either being pursued or pursuing something that I can't see or explain, but I know is there. Carter is good to me, but he doesn't understand. His family members are hardscrabble, not nuts, and he doesn't know about the darkest corners of my mind. I tried to keep it that way. We've never lived together. I've always been here for Mom and Grace. That might change now. Aunt Grace died today. Approximately 15 hours ago, I suppose, since it's just after 3 a.m. My mother found her in the tub, submerged within a bath of bubbles, seaweed scrub on her face, pearls around her neck, dead. Her eyes were wide open, as if staring in horror at something, like a ghost or a water witch. Mom screamed and screamed. I was glad I was home. I kept my cool. I called 911. But I cannot unsee the vision of her body or disimagine her specter. I'm sure she's wandering through the garden's woods right now, undoubtedly near the water's edge. The coroner said that her cause of death was a heart attack. Grace didn't exercise much and ate badly. Bad hearts ran in the family, and she hated seeing doctors. It was no surprise. But I can't stop thinking about it. Mom wailed and wailed and wailed. I haven't cried yet. I might be in shock. I spent more time with her than Mom did. I should be hysterical. Instead, I'm numb and tired, but sleepless and restless. I wonder if Carter will let Mom live with us when we marry and I move into his new apartment. He purchased it for me, for us. It's spacious and in a nicer part of the city. I can't imagine leaving Mom alone here with Grace's ghost. The memory of her haunting every nook, cranny, and corner. Perhaps I shouldn't get married. I can call off the engagement. I shouldn't be a mother. Perhaps this is the universe's way of indicating that I shouldn't be a wife either. I'll just stay here in my childhood home with Mom. That might be the best course of action. Carter is a good man. He'll find another woman. One who will make a good mother and an excellent wife, and who doesn't have dreams and delusions and doubts. One who doesn't see mythical creatures and dream about her own ghost. I'm more concerned with Grace's soul than my own, though. I still have my earthly body. Hers is in the morgue, on a gurney, lying still under a tarp and stucco ceiling and fluorescent lights. She must be so confused. I've heard that EMS workers report paranormal encounters at higher rates than other professionals. I wonder if either of the ones who came here today heard or felt her. Was she trying to get back into her body? Was she screaming, raving, hitting them? I've heard that ghosts can touch you if they really want to. Somehow, I doubt all of that, though. Neither EMS worker had seemed alarmed. The only one screaming was Mom. Otherwise, it was quiet, eerily quiet. Before they came, you could hear a pin drop, aside from Mom's sobs. And even when they picked up the body and covered it and hauled it away, they worked with a silent diligence that was somehow stoic. I suppose I could tell myself that Grace is freer now. That's what I told myself when my dad died. But my dad had been very sick for a very long time. Grace had been well, or seemed well. If she had pains, she didn't report them. So this feels more like a robbery than a transition into another life. A new body for an old soul. She's gone, but should be here. She's in the wind when she should be in bed. To the botanical garden and find her. Surely she's wandering there, her feet not quite touching the earth. She won't reincarnate. She'll refuse. She'll fight St. Peter at the pearly gates, and he'll have no choice but to send her back to earth, back to the garden with its sturdy trees and tranquil ponds, back to where she assumes she belongs. I've felt this way before about some of the bodies I've worked on, the young ones especially, car crash victims, gangland homicides. Sometimes I think I do see and hear their spirits begging me to revive them. Often I speak to them and hope that my boss won't come in. I cannot offer them the comforts that they seek. the promise of their old life and body that's already gone before they get wheeled in front of me. But I offer them advice. I tell the spirits to roam and wander, to see the world if they can. I have no idea if they are bound to certain areas or select to stay near their life's turf. There are conflicting reports about that. But I tell the spirits if they can wander, do, for there is much to see in the world. Aunt Grace hadn't taken that chance in life, and now she never will. In death, though, perhaps she will, if she takes a notion to drift out of her comfort zone. I assume that she will go back to the water, seeking the mermaids. She always wanted to rejoin them. Her kinship with them was stronger than that of any human, even me. Of course, it was all made up inside of her head, but Grace lived inside of her head. She liked it there. The mer people were real to her. Perhaps in the next life, they're real to everyone. Who knows? Anything is possible. Mom is sleeping, finally. I thought she'd never find peace again. I considered slipping her a sedative. I'm glad it didn't come to that. I've never seen her this upset, not even when Dad passed. It might have been better if I found Aunt Grace, but who knows? Mom will need time to recover from this, but I'm sure she will. She and Grace hadn't been as close as she wished, and that will at least help to dull the pain some. At least I assume. We'll soon see. As for me, I'm fine. I know that Grace isn't truly gone. I now have a new purpose in life. To find her ghost, track her spirit, reconnect. I'll do that tomorrow after I make the funeral arrangements. There are several parts of the garden where she'll likely lurk. Once I find her, reestablishing our repertoire will be easy. She'll wait for Mom and me. Perhaps one day we'll all wander in her garden together. The weight of my strangely dry grief is bearing down on me, like an anchor slamming down on my frame, a skeleton jumping my bones. I am waiting for the floodgates to open. My eyes should be wet. The stress and anxiety and fears are coming. I can control them no more than I can control the tides. I suddenly want my paper doll collection, the one I cherished as a little girl. Grace and I would dress them up together and dance with them. We always strove to be chipper, despite knowing that death loomed. Here, there, everywhere. I realize that this whole train of thoughts really is nothing more than the midnight musings of a grieving woman with a troubled past who cannot sleep after the death of a loved one. I can draw my own conclusions, right or wrong, as should everyone. I cannot think in chronological order. My memories are jumbled, a dance of craziness and confusion. It seems to me that static is the language of the void, the twilight between life and death. If you listen to it carefully, you'll hear voices. I fancied myself a connoisseur of static, but I can't take it anymore. There are too many pleas, too much need. I am a mere mortal amid the chaos of the cosmos. I'm afraid to bathe. I'm afraid ice blocks will fall on me, punishment for my lack of tears. I should feel guilty and sad. Instead, I worry about the knots in my hair, and I cannot stop thinking about the storm that whisked Aunt Grace away all those years ago. Now she's been whisked away again, and this time she'll stay gone. The storm of life takes no prisoners. Maybe she found her undersea castle, her Atlantis, her devoted subjects, and her great hall. As I lay me down to sleep, I try to imagine it, and I hope that it's true. I try to be optimistic. I hope the mortuary did a good job with her makeup. She'd want to look good when she embraced death, or the afterlife, or whatever. Who knows? Anything is possible. I wonder if death will come for me young, like it had Grace, and my father, and my grandparents. I wonder if I'll end up in a padded room. I wonder if I should call off the wedding, continue school, or quit. Yet above all else, I wonder if I'm destined to descend down the same dark hole as Grace. I think of graveyards and skeletons, where and what Grace will soon be. I think of those old cartoons, those illustrated dancing bones, drawn toothy smiles. Why should skeletons not dance and guard their graves as ghosts? Are they not us? Departed? It is a shame that I do not know any magicians. They could fix this. They would be able to conjure something, although Aunt Grace would disagree. She didn't like magicians. She said they were charlatans. She said wizards knew better, but I've never even seen a wizard. Magicians occasionally appear on street corners, performing for tips. I've seen them. Once the newspapers reported that one had murdered his sidekick. He'd been caught red-handed, cleaning up the scene. His sidekick is on the other side now. Spirits lingering, old souls, poison, skulls and bones are symbolic of pirates and poison, tainted by the noise and chaos and disorder of the world, both past and present. I wonder if I should take up art or cave exploration, something involving glitter and crystals and prettiness. Mom might be interested in such a hobby too. We should do it together, to bond. I should look at more galaxy photos with her. She loves those. She's still fascinated by space. So am I. Space is so vast. Surely we aren't alone. Even if mermaids don't exist, and they might, scientists do not discredit the possibility of alien life. It's fascinating to consider what forms it might take. Part of me still believes that the center of the moon is filled with glitter. Fabulous, beautiful glitter. It's the closest thing to stardust that us Earthlings will ever see. I should adorn myself in glitter in memory of Grace. She would approve. I'd refuse to ever wash it off.
Water, everywhere. It always comes back to water. My brain is full of water. Asleep, awake, it's always there. Rain droplets. Showers, birds, fountains, puddles, untapped, unacknowledged. It ends in a waterfall. An edge. Ring around the rosy. Pocket full of posies. Ashes. Ashes. We all fall down. There are no survivors.
I'm afraid to step into the shower. I fear looking down and seeing a water witch, Jenny green teeth, staring up at me from the drain, sharp teeth gnawing at the grate. I once had to take a shower during a power outage and couldn't do it in the dark, sure that a bony hand would reach out and grab me. I took a flashlight in with me. Grace assured me that water witches and sirens and all things watery and predatory detest bright lights. But I kept jumping at shadows, seeing talon-like fingers and sharp teeth on the tiled walls. And from way down within the pipes, I heard cackling. There is no resolution. Of course there isn't. But I remember the lights and the shadows in the tub, and I want to scream myself into oblivion. I stand under the shower spray sometimes and let the water rain down on me. It seems like it would be fun to shower under dancing shadows, but it wasn't. It was menacing. I know what lurks in water. While I showered, Grace stood outside, banging a pot and pan together and singing off key. La 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 la. She said that the Chinese scared demons off with loud noises. If it worked for them, it might work for us. Whatever was down in the pipes, because there was surely something down there, wanted my attention. It whispered and cackled and mocked. I held my ground. I refused to take the bait. Grace said the showers in the asylum had been similar. Dark, quick, usually too cold. If I took a shower in the dark now, would Grace's ghost come to protect me? She said the attendants at the asylum had promised her protection while she showered, and while I know that they were merely humoring her, I was touched by that display of kindness. Grace used to sing in the shower. Her favorite tune was an old seafaring shanty called "What Will We Do with the Drunken Sailor?" I have no idea how she learned it. She insisted Nerissa the mermaid had taught it to her. She sang it well, Off-key, yes, but that somehow made it more haunting and memorable. If I listen closely, I think I can hear her. I find myself unable to stop imagining Aunt Grace in the asylum's communal shower, leading the other women in elaborate song and dance routines fit to rival a Broadway production. An unhinged version of the Rockettes. It's a ridiculous concept, of course, but it was the sort of thing she'd do. When she lived with us, she danced around quite often. She loved music. The radio was rarely switched off. When she sang in the shower, she'd call through the door and encourage me to join in. More often than not, I did. Say what you will about her, but I'm fairly certain that she found a way to enliven even the most sterile clinical spaces. I suppose that was her way of coping, of controlling her utter dread of possibly looking down to see witchy eyes staring up at her from the depths of the drain. It was better to sing than scream. I wonder if I'll experience such showers one day. I know the big asylums have largely closed down, but I wonder. The shower looks like a padded cell, except it's harder and colder. Everything industrial has its place, its purpose, its function, unlike people. Some of us seem to have no function whatsoever, no use, no strength, no mission. Carter told me he likes working on fans most. He punches in every day and watches the clock. He avoids the dreaded pink slip. He has promised to build me a greenhouse one day. He knows how much I enjoy the one in the public gardens. I'm dreaming again. I'm running, of course, and in the woods as usual. I'm running from something bigger than a water witch, though. I'm running from the apocalypse. Toward the end of her life, Grace had gotten obsessed with the end of the world. She'd mentioned this world view occasionally in the past, but it got much worse in the last few months. Grace would go on and on and on about astral planes and astral projection and all this new age type stuff that she'd never paid much attention to before. She suggested that the rapture was coming, but we would all be safe since if she was authorized to converse with mermaids, then she would surely be allowed to associate with angels, and they would save us all. Maybe the heavens should open up and drown the world. It's happened before, Noah's Ark and all that jazz. I bet Grace's ghost is already residing in the greenhouse of the botanical gardens. She'd always loved that greenhouse, but toward her last days, she started incorporating it into her end time storyline. She said that the greenhouse was a portal into another world, another realm, another dimension. She tried to break into it once. I'm surprised that no alarms sounded. Spirits can lay claim to any greenhouse that they please. The whole garden is now her realm. I suppose I should have drowned myself years ago. Grace and I should have done it together. I find myself thinking of the ocean, the deep blue sea. I hope Grace is there now. I envision her dancing, celebrating, making sense of the noise and the lights and the chaos from which she came, from which we all came. Her very bones reverberated with glee. She knew how to walk the lines of the world that she'd created inside her head. The line between acceptable and unacceptable. The line between darkness and light. The line between femininity and vulgarity. But she did as she pleased, usually when it pleased her to do so. And that's got to count for something. Colors and dancing and excess. We are all just flesh and bone. Why shouldn't we celebrate who we are and the brilliant, mad universe that created all things, ourselves included? Why shouldn't we wander and ponder, aspire and dream, scream and laugh, connect and disconnect, sleep, eat, party and indulge merriment like we will never have the chance again? We might not. It's a mad world of mayhem. We should embrace the afterlife. Surely it's not crazy to expect an afterlife, something more. It may be better than this life. It may be worse. And all follow that mayhem down, down, down into the mad sea of dreams and shards of memories. Like grace, I'll be another soul, another psyche, another spirit residing in the dark hole of her garden of madness.
She is night woman.